So in the book Metadimensional, I make two kind of arguments. Uh, the first kind would be to show how because of the double slit experiment, because uh, of things we know about biology and whatever, then the theory makes sense. Like trying to prove to make you incentivize you to believe that the theory makes sense because of things that you can find in that you already know. Uh, but then there are a different. These arguments try to convince you to believe in the theory, to believe the theory is true. Now there's a different type of arguments which are, if you assume that the theory is true, you take that as a given, then look at all this stuff, how this stuff makes much makes nice sense, or some kind of shows some interesting symmetries or ideas. So the video I made, the last video I made about theism and atheism, falls into the second category. It's not going to prove to you that that the theory is true, but if you agree that the theory is true, then that's the next step. That's like one thing you can deduce from it. But there's a much greater center of these type of arguments, which is all the thing that follows from metatemporal evolution, from the idea that experience can drift between realities, between different basically different both physical worlds, both different in content and in the laws themselves. It is effectively that once you accept that the theory is true, and once you don't question that, and you should always question that, but once you don't question that, then you come to the conclusion of there being this process of experiential selection, where where experience basically determines the laws of nature according to semantic features. So it is not like what we assume under physicalism is that everything that experience is downstream of what the physical world is. The physical world determines the properties of experience of our perception, of our experiences, the fundamental properties. But if the theory is true, then it's the opposite. Much of it goes in the opposite direction. It's not that the physical world determines the properties of experience, but rather the experience determines the properties of the physical world. So one of these is the fact that space is three-dimensional. Space is three-dimensional not because space is three-dimensional, but rather because experience needs three-dimensional elements to be a part of that world. Experience is change, and change is a transition between state A, state B, and direction between them. So you need three pieces of information. For that, you need three dimensions. And this is what experience is, if experience has changed. So everything in reality that experience can perceive must be of that type, must be of the capacity for change. And for that, for change, you need a three-dimensional world. You need a start. You need three coordinates: one for start, one for end, and one for the relation from where to where. So that's but it also goes into the very laws of nature, like why they are as they are. Now, this stuff is like all of this stuff is confirmation bias. There's nothing about these kind of arguments that will convince you that it is true. You first assume they are true, and then you see the symmetries. But if you think about the laws of nature, now, right now, we're in a state where there's a problem adding gravity to the other laws, the electromagnetism, and the weak force and the strong force. There's a problem to unify them. Now, why? Now think about it this way. But all of these forces came, according to, once you assume that the theory is true, all these forces came to be because experiences wanted some kind of a semantic, and that these laws came to just to make these semantics possible. So now now think about this: how important it is for experience to be on a flat surface, like to have experiences on a flat surface, versus how important it is for it to know that about electromagnetism, about the nuclear forces and all that. It doesn't really care about electromagnetism and the nuclear forces. When you dream, you hardly ever dream about electromagnetism or the nuclear forces, but you always are, almost always, on a plane. Like you have that ground, and for there to be a ground, you need to have a force that pushes you into the ground. So gravity would have to have been added to the concoction that the body produces for experience to perceive, way before it got to think about stuff like electromagnetism and nuclear forces. And that could explain why it's so hard to unite them, because there's so much experiential selection processes happen between the injection of the gravity and the injection of these other laws when we learn about the atom and electromagnetism and all that. So that's why that would explain why it's so hard to unify them, because gravity came so earlier than electromagnetism. And then you think about the principle of least action, the idea that that explain why light refracts the way it does. It's because it has to arrive at a specific position at a given time. So this also can be the whole idea of least action. It's as if like something is trying to minimize the action. But if you think about it in terms of experiential selection, first you had light. You need the light because you need to perceive things, and you need to have them to have colors and all that stuff. So you needed that. That came earlier, and then you needed to accommodate that with adds other things to that reality and you need to preserve the same laws, like the body. You need to preserve the same laws as before, that light would work the same as it did. So it took shortcuts wherever it could, while preserving that. So it didn't really minimize. It didn't try to minimize. It just tried to add stuff without changing anything. So if the speed of light was x, and then now it had to add refraction through liquids or whatever, then it had to work with what it had, because that came first, and only later you'd have more complexities in the physical world. So of course, all of this is just doesn't prove anything. And even if experiential selection exists, it doesn't have to be this. And it also, even if it is the case that it is like that, through metatemporal evolution, through experience's ability to drift between realities, it could obfuscate all this evidence, and then or make it so that gravity would unite with all the other laws, and there would be another reason why for the principle of least action. But it's still a nice it's a different way to analyze nature. And while the examples I gave might be dumb, and maybe they are really dumb, it's still a different way to analyze physics and think about physics.